It's 2017 and the Nintendo Switch comes out with only one game people really care about playing at launch, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. As you all know by this point, that game has been heralded as the best game of all time by some. Some even say the best Zelda of all time. However, I myself, an avid Zelda fan, have never really considered it the best Zelda of all time.
Oh shit, here we go again.
I recognize it's a good game and all, that it's well crafted, that it has the biggest world in all of Zelda for you to explore. It has a nice art style. It has, well, not really that many quests to do, but it has fun quests that take you to fun little areas of the Breath of the Wild map. However, for me, my problem with Breath of the Wild has always been that it's missing certain things from Zelda that makes Zelda, well, Zelda, at least in my opinion. With Breath of the Wild, there were no traditional dungeons. Everything was split into shrines, or Korok seed hunting if you wanted to get rewarded with a giant golden piece of crap at the end of that quest. For traditional dungeons, you only really had 5 options in Breath of the Wild. The Divine Beast making 4 of them, and finally Hyrule Castle making the final dungeon of the game. With at least Hyrule Castle, there was a sandbox element to it. You could approach Hyrule Castle in multiple ways to get to the center of it and find Ganon. However, with the Divine Beast, that was more or less just a linear path in which there was really only one way to solve the dungeon, as they most closely resembled the old dungeons from the previous Zelda games. Some have said that Breath of the Wild's nature of just throwing these antiquated dungeons out has been a good thing. That in the past, just as I said, there was only one way to solve those dungeons, and if there was some choice in those dungeons, it was always very minimal. But for me, my problem with Breath of the Wild is that without the dungeons, you're left with the shrines. And sure, there's different puzzles to do in the shrines, but the shrines just all feel the same to me after a while. And there's like 100 or 120 of those things in that game. I don't really remember myself, and I'm too lazy to look it up right now. But I did play the game on launch back in 2017, and I got all the shrines. I got the green tunic and got Link looking like his classic self, and I beat the 4 Divine Beasts, and I beat Ganon, and then I did the DLC, and I got the motorcycle. And then I finally beat the Master Sword DLC as well. And the only thing I really have left to do, aside from maybe a side quest or 2 I missed, is the Korok seeds, and I have no interest in doing that. My point being is Breath of the Wild at the end of the day felt a little bare bones to me in certain areas. And that might be an unpopular opinion because most people I see talk about Breath of the Wild say there's so much content, there's so much world, there's so much this, there's so much that to the game. But it's just missing that Zelda spark to it. Yes, it's a Zelda game. Yes, you play as Link. Yes, there's Zelda. Yes, there's Ganon. There's Gerudos. There's Zoras. There's Gorons. There's even Koroks. There's even Kakariko Village. There's even Impa. There's not really Epona, but there's Lon Lon Ranch. That's in the game as well. And Temple of Time's there. You even got the Lost Woods and the Great Deku Tree. You got all these things that have been in previous Zelda games. But for me, that's about where the Zelda connection ends. I have held the opinion that Breath of the Wild did not need to be a Zelda game. Nintendo could have released it as its own IP, but they went ahead and released it as a Zelda game. I guess some people could argue Zelda was getting stale by the time we got to Skyward Sword, and that it was time to ditch tradition, and ditch the traditional dungeons, and structure of what used to be a Zelda game. I think Zelda needs that traditional structure to it. For a lot of people, that's what makes Zelda worth playing. Zelda has stuck to its same structure since '91 when A Link to the Past came out. There's always been 3 things you have to collect before you move on to the main part of the game, and then for the most part it's about 5 to 7 dungeons of solving puzzles and using items until you're ready to go face off against Ganondorf and save Zelda. So, Tears of the Kingdom. That's what this video is really about. Not Breath of the Wild, but Tears of the Kingdom. A lot of people are excited for it. A lot of people are pissed about it because of the $70 price tag. Luckily, some people were able to pre-order it for $60 if you were lucky enough to get pre-order in GameStop or Amazon in time. But nowadays, if you want to pre-order the game, or if you're watching this in the future, buy the game, it's $70. And knowing Nintendo, there's not going to be a sale anytime soon. But Tears of the Kingdom, I worry about it. Not that, this is life or death or anything, but I worry about the future of Zelda because I don't want Tears of the Kingdom to come out and there not be any music and there not be any traditional dungeons and it basically literally be Breath of the Wild 2, which for all intents and purposes, so far it is Breath of the Wild 2. It takes place in the same Hyrule. It has the same Link, has the same Zelda. It even has supposedly the same Ganondorf in this case. And from all the footage I've watched, at least the land portion of the map looks exactly the same. It's the same Hyrule from Breath of the Wild. And this game started out as a DLC for Breath of the Wild. It got so big that Nintendo decided to make it a sequel. And that's worrying to me because I don't want to just play the same game all over again, but with just the sky added to it, or just being able to build your own vehicle added to it. I swear to God, if this game comes out and I see a Guardian out there in the field and the only music I hear in the damn game is with the piano, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna lose it because I just love the music of traditional Zelda so much. I love hearing the Zelda theme blast on as I'm just walking through the field, or hearing a spooky dungeon theme in a traditional dungeon. And with Breath of the Wild, it was very minimalist design when it came to music. I recognize there's a soundtrack, and I recognize that some people will complain and say, well, there's no music in Zelda, and I know there is. There is a soundtrack to Breath of the Wild. I know it's more than just one song, but that's the problem with Breath of the Wild soundtrack, is when you're playing the game, it sounds like there's just one song to it, and that's it. And that's the issue with the dungeons as well, with the shrines. It feels like it's just one dungeon you're doing. It's just one, And there's no story. There is a story in Breath of the Wild, but you have to go and find it. You have to go to these random parts of the map that you wouldn't really find all that organically unless you pulled up a walkthrough online, or you just got lucky and happened across one. I'm sure there's some NPC in Breath of the Wild that has a hint that points you the right locations to pick up these cutscenes that make up the story. But who am I kidding? Most people don't read what NPCs say. And with Tears of the Kingdom, with it literally being the same Link in the same Hyrule and starting out as a Breath of the Wild DLC, I feel that if that game comes out and the story is structured in the same way, where you have to go looking for it, where it's not presented to you in a traditional manner, where there is no traditional dungeon, where there's no traditional soundtrack, where there's barely any supporting cast, I don't think people are going to go for that a second time around. Maybe I'm wrong, And maybe it will be like the recent Pokemon, where since it's Nintendo and it's a certain IP, people just eat it up no matter what, and they'll tell you to shut the hell up if you have a problem with the game. But I don't know. At least with the Pokemon games, it's a different region every game. Even if the graphics get worse somehow as we go into the future with Pokemon, it is a different region, different map, different characters, different music. But with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, so far it's looking like Tears of the Kingdom is the dark world of Breath of the Wild, or the adult timeline of Breath of the Wild. Meaning, in Ocarina of Time, the game was split in two parts, right? Kid Link, Adult Link, and you had the same map, but with minor differences between the two characters. Same thing in A Link to the Past, Light World, Dark World. Same Link, same Hyrule, kind of. But the difference being when you went between the two worlds, you remained at the same map more or less, but there was changes. Is that how Tears of the Kingdom is going to be? I'm not sure. And it brings into question Nintendo's hardware. If Nintendo had stronger hardware with the Switch, maybe Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom could have been one game. But that's a different discussion for a different time. I just think that Tears of the Kingdom is going to have to do something completely different than Breath of the Wild for it to stand on its own legs and continue to be the direction Nintendo takes Zelda. If this game flops or is received poorly, then I definitely see Nintendo going back to the traditional style of Zelda that they were doing prior to Breath of the Wild. But we'll see. I'm hoping Tears of the Kingdom is good, but if it's not, well, I'm still gonna play it anyway because I've been playing Nintendo for, well, let's just say a long time. Anyway, that's it for the video. Thanks for listening and have a good one. Bye.